X demanded I cook the dinner he wanted. This happened a long time ago but still tickles me. The year was 1971 and I got married for the first time. Things were a lot different back then for women. We had just gotten married the day before and the next morning my husband woke up and told me he wanted cabbage, sausage and potatoes for dinner. At this point I had never eaten sausage and was never going to it, strangely enough, and never had cabbage. I told him I didn't eat those things and he simply told me that that's what I was fixing. So I unpacked the new pots and pans, is that the biggest pot on the stove, and added water, cabbage, potatoes with seasonings. I turned it on high. When everything inside the pot, which was Teflon, burnt to a crisp, I still left it there until it completely ruined the pot. When he got home I told him going forward I would be cooking dinners that we both could eat. As we have been dating almost 3 years, I clearly knew what kind of foods we both liked. He was seriously mad. I calmly stuck to my guns and told him he wasn't going to bully me, and just because we were married doesn't mean he got to tell me what to do. The marriage lasted a year and a half. I couldn't wait to get away. My old college friend married up to an intelligent, kind, lovely woman. They were both teachers. Sincere young people. But not long after the wedding, knowing chili was one of his favorite meals, she made it as a surprise for him for dinner. Dumb shit that he was, he spent the entire meal telling her how to make it better. They've been married for more than 40 years and have 2 beautiful adult daughters, but when he wants chili, he has to make it himself, because she has never made it since. I had to chuckle when I read this post. I too married in 1971 and my marriage also lasted only a year and a half. X was a misogynistic ex-Marine and I was naive while still learning my own life boundaries. He showed me how to fold all his clothes properly, including his underwear and t-shirts, and exactly how they were to be placed in the drawers. He also wouldn't let me advance my nursing practice with more education. Yep, dumped his controlling ass. Ugh. As an addendum to the story, and I actually had a child together and then I left him. He whined and tried to get me back, but as the damn fool would not let me have books or learn to drive while I was with him, I wasn't the least bit interested. But he did show up in the mid-1990s and asked if I would take him back, lol. I told him that would not be happening if he were the last man on earth. He now hates my guts. Oh well. Still blames me for his alcoholism. I get that it was a different time, but the amount of stories I have heard where the wedding date was some sort of switch where the man thought that the woman was suddenly his underling is disturbing. Oh man. The longer I'm on the internet, the more I appreciate my husband and how supportive and wonderful he is. On a related note, does anybody else think it is wrong when the person who never actually does a chore criticizes or refuses any attempts to make said chore easier? I often tell of my dad's grandpa who had a Category 5 meltdown when my dad bought his grandma a washing machine. She was 70 years old and still doing laundry twice a week in the bathtub. It took hours and physical strength she clearly no longer had. The reason he was losing his shit. The expensive laundry soap the machine would need. The same damn laundry soap she was already using in the bathtub for the last 30 years. Same year, 1971, my dad told my mum to put the dinner in the oven as he was out drinking. It was salad. He beat her badly for it and she said it was worth every punch. Obviously divorced shortly after. I got married in 1979 and have the opposite story. On our first morning as a married couple, I got up early and made a nice breakfast for both of us, just as my mom made for my dad every day. My husband ate it politely and then told me he didn't actually eat breakfast and I certainly didn't need to cook it for him. We've been married 42 years now. My ex would wake up and demand I give him a blowjob and that I walk down to a local Taco Joe's and get him some breakfast. That marriage didn't last long, either. They wait until the wedding ring is on, then their true selves come out. How old were you when y'all got married? I remember on my wedding night, after the reception, on the quiet streets of Seattle, I turned to my beautiful new bride and said, "Now that we're married, and you are my wife, you have to be subservient to me." A beat later, we laughed and laughed and laughed. Marriage is about a partnership, not dominance. Fuck that guy. My father loved salad. My mother refused to make him salad for breakfast, though. They were 8 years between each of my 3 marriages. The last one ended 36 years ago. It's not like I was rushing right back in. And how judgmental of you. I've now been single and very happy for 36 years. Gender roles are dumb. One of my favorite things to gift my mother are books, and one of my dad's favorite things to do is to cook for the family. You got to 18 and marriage without ever eating sausage or cabbage. Obviously good on you for getting rid of the bastard, but both of those are tasty foods. Oh boy. I got married in 2017. He knew beforehand I didn't want kids, but apparently after we got married, he thought that would change for some reason. He told me he wouldn't allow me to change my birth control implant in the arm, so we could have kids. I left him a few months later. Insane. Have an amazing boyfriend now. Although, scared to get married, so he's okay waiting for a while. My mother told the story of my father pestering her to make stuffed peppers when they were first married. She finally relented and made them. He ate the filling and left the peppers. That was the only time in her life that she made stuffed peppers. I asked my new husband how come I always have to make the bed. He sweetly said, well, when I get up you are still sleeping in it. I hadn't thought that one through. That's a dumb husband. If he had just said, honey, I love everything you do, but no, I would love to eat tonight some cabbage, sausage and potatoes, with that, right there, the odds of him getting some good sausage, cabbage, and potatoes increased tenfold. In honor of the holidays, I'ma share my story. I had worked 12-hour shifts all week, decorated the house, bought stupid toys the kids wanted, and spent all day cooking festive meal, turkey, sides, desserts, blah blah blah. I was tired. When I told my then husband I was tired, he said, I don't know why you even bothered. Me and the kids would have been happy with grilled cheese sandwiches. A beautiful snow globe of a light bulb went off above my head. I gazed at him in wonder, and replied, for once, you are right. I don't know why I bother either. After that day, I packed up whatever shush tea I could fit in my car, took the kids and left. Fast forward 20 years and I still dislike Christmas. Sincerely, Mrs. Grinch. I can't even imagine my husband pulling some shit like that. Good on you for not staying. It's funny the kinds of assumption we have about marriage. Seems like he expected a nanny or a servant. I wonder if his parents had this dynamic and he was trying to recreate it. Glad you got out of there. Hopefully you didn't face too much stigma being a divorcee in the 70s. Poor Potts died for his sins. I jokingly tell my wife what to do, like we are married from the 60s 70s, and we laugh. I usually cook though. It's crazy how far we have come from then. My friend's husband and sons used to make fun of her cooking. After a while, she refused to cook. Her husband is an excellent cook. My dad would say, all he deserves is hot lip and cold shoulder. Were there red flags when dating? Reminds me of a story about my parents. My mom is from Missouri, dad from California. Shortly after they got married, my dad said he wanted some avocados. Mom has never even seen one before, and asked my dad how to prepare it. Dad was a smart ass, so he just said to bake it, thinking my mom was joking. Mom split an avocado in half, baked it until basically charcoal, and when Dad started laughing at her, she threw it on his plate and said if he didn't eat it, the next thing he tasted would be the pan she had in her hand. My dad ate it, and never again in almost 50 years of marriage specifically requested avocado. Bad husbands are still like this, just more covert. Happier to be on the other side of my awful marriage as well. Claps. Good for you lol. I'm just loving the way all the insecure men are crawling out of the woodwork here and showing their collective ass. Hell yeah. Good for you. The wife of a couple I know was married once before. He ex was a real prick and would get drunk and beat her. One day she cooked him a stroganoff from a jar. What she didn't realize was the jar had been opened and the sauce gave him food poisoning and put him in hospital for 4 days. The next time he beat her, she went and bought a jar, opened the lid and put it back in the cupboard. Swipo. Married in 1975. My husband seldom asks me to make anything, often tells me there isn't need to cook anything, so sometimes I don't. I do the cooking, he does the dishes. One time, when we were first married, he said, since you have all these cookbooks, I'm going to find something for you to cook. I had like 4 cookbooks, I now have hundreds. Lol. Anyway, he said, cook beanies weenies. I said I don't need a cookbook for that, as it is simply hot dogs and baked beans cooked together. Lol. Marriage isn't worth it for women. When I was first married, in 1974, we were sort of hippies. My husband had the trappings, but underneath was a straight Catholic boy. Always willing to help out domestically, as he was brought up by a widow in the 50s, 60s and knew a woman's lot was hard. One day he comes out with the phrase, husband time. I just looked at him and said, I only have one kind of time, my name, time. I nipped that sucker in the bud. Flash forward, married for 47 years. He still thinks about husband time, I can tell, but wouldn't dare mention it. Lol. My wife one day got pissy about how I was doing the dishes, while doing them. I stopped, poured a beer and went to watch TV without saying a word. She hated doing the dishes the next week but she apologized eventually. Sounds a lot like my dad when he told me that I should stop giving a shit once I got married. Nowadays HES blocked on everything and divorced. Had family therapy where he claimed everything he did to my mother was fine because it was what adults do. Some people are fucked up. Man, women's unpaid labor, house chores mostly, is so scarcely appreciated. Also, men, especially of older generations but still to this day, mansplaining chores and yet not lifting a finger to help make me so disappointed and have me believe I'd rather die alone. Holy shit, people really do be like that. And being 1970s or whatever doesn't excuse any of that. My 90-year-old grandfather has never said anything remotely close to that to my grandmother in all their 50-plus years of marriage. I was born in 1971 and also was born with extra sass. That's a good year. And good riddance to all wasbands. If he brought it up with his barber, they'd have probably talked about how you have to hit your wife at times to keep her in line. I had to laugh at this. When I got married my wife became a stay-at-home and I was insistent that my laundry be done a certain way. Well, guess who's been doing his own laundry for the last 11 years? Still married and still get the occasional opportunity to apologize for it. But damn, I wish I could send a letter to my younger self that simply says, say thank you and shut up. My parents got married in the late 1960s, and my mother began running the office side of the business. Early on, she asked what her monthly allowance would be. He looked at her like she was crazy and said, we're partners, the money is ours, spend what you need to. They drove each other crazy and loved each other fiercely for over 40 years. It was a great marriage. This was one of those, now that we are married you are my servant, kind of guys. These are the people who make up the core of the religious wrong. There's a great story about the beginnings of a marriage and now the tone was set. A woman in the Midwest got married sometime in the 1940s, guessing from the context. After the wedding, the bride took her new husband's hand and said, we are married. I am your wife. There are some things I won't put up with. If you ever raise a hand to me, one night when you are sleeping I will sew you into the sheets and beat you to death with a frying pan. The rest of the story is this, told by a grandchild. Grandpa was always the kindlest, gentlest man I ever knew. The asterisk is to tell you I recognize that this is a slightly archaic activity and you may not have heard of it. It has to do with creating clothing out of cloth. I'm so grateful for the man I have. He's the kindest, most compassionate man I ever knew. He'd never mistreat me or talk down to me. That was a bold and badass move from Op. Considering the 70s when male domination is very much a thing. I guess no one ever crossed Op and made it out unharmed. Good for you. You both sound like completely reasonable people. I can't imagine why it didn't work out.